World building in D&D can be daunting. You have this huge white canvas with a large world with a ton of empty space in the middle. Where do you start building your world? Well, start with these 7 DM tips for world building. Let's talk about it. How's it going, everyone? My name is Ron, and if you end up liking this video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. This helps me out a lot and it helps me grow my channel with the YouTube algorithm. So without further ado, let's get on with the video. Tip number 1 is going to be start small. Start small and just work on one single thing. One single town, one single castle, one single kingdom. Don't go out and do huge world building, broad brushstrokes things. Work on things that are something simply that your player characters will interact with within the first 5 sessions of the campaign. Something that is like the starting town, quest number 1, who's there, why are they there. Start with something incredibly small. We're going to get into other world building things that we'll kind of expand on this a little bit, but start small. You have to start somewhere. Start with something that is going to be the things that are in session number 1. You have the name of your world, you have the name of your kingdom, you have the name of this town. Start with something that they're going to interact with on session number 1. Then start with something that you want them to interact with session number 2. And then from there we can build it out. But if you're not working on something right at the beginning that they're going to interact with within the first 5 sessions of the game, honestly, I think it's just procrastinating. Start small, start with something that your player characters will see and interact with. Talking about something that your players will interact with, start building while you play. Just start anywhere. You have a campaign idea, which is why you're even watching these videos to begin with, and I'm sure you're watching 100 more on YouTube as well. But if you have a campaign idea, just start with something. Start with something that is small, like in tip number 1, and then just go from there, but build while you play. Players are inevitably going to twist and turn and zig and zag, and they're just going to go all over the place. So it's almost impossible to know where they are going to go. So just start with something. You can have like the beginning 3 or 4 sessions kind of planned out, because then you can kind of make an excuse of, I want your characters to go this route because I want them to get used to being with each other, kind of get used to being in a party, and this is going to be the reason why we're all coming together to begin with, is we're all going to go out and deal with these goblins, or deal with these bandits, or deal with these orcs, or deal with something. So this is something you can plan out very easily at the beginning. However, after that, your players can go anywhere and do anything, so it's really pointless to plan ahead of that. So simply plan and build while you are actually playing your game. That way, if you give out a quest and then your characters go left instead of right, you can figure that out. You can easily change things as well. It's like, if you think that they're going to go left and they go right, whatever's on the left, you can just move it over to the correct area, or the area that they're going, rather. So you don't have to make any hard adjustments either. You can kind of build while you're playing and kind of guide your characters, or your player characters, where they should go and what that you want them to see without kind of railroading them. Talking about your players, number 3 is have your players build the world. Easy enough with all of the world building tips that you see online, and you make this big map, and it's this continental map, and you have a lot of space. Simply put a dot down. Make a city right here, make a city there, town there, forest there, and you can just kind of splatter these dots all around your map. When you're actually starting with character creation, this will help a lot, because your player characters will inevitably ask you, where do we start? Well, you're starting on this continent. Well, where in this continent can I start? Then you can simply ask them, where do you want to start? What is your hometown like? Are you starting in the forest? Well, it turns out I have a town in the forest, like right here on my map. So you can just start there. You can also just say, I want to be in the mountains. Well, there's actually a hidden town over in the mountains over in this way. You might have planned it to be dwarves, and they're an elf, and they want to be from the mountains. Okay, you can figure that stuff out later. But having these things kind of like in what I was saying before, if you just splatter some dots around your map, make them like sensible, but just don't give them names. Just say, this is town here, unnamed forest town, unnamed mountain town, unnamed river town. And you can just splatter them across the map, and then when your players tell you kind of, I was thinking my character was going to be from like a fishing village, and you can say, well, there's a lake right here, and there's a town on the lake. So why don't you be from this town? And they can say, okay, well, I don't know anything about the town. Well, you can just say, here you go. You have free reign. You tell me about what this town is right here. It doesn't even have a name. You can kind of give that off to your player characters. And I know myself, maybe it's just because I'm a DM, but when I join games and the other DM says, hey, you're from this town, tell me about this town, I absolutely love doing that stuff. It kind of ties into tip number 1 with me in starting small. If you just work on a single village and you're in this parameter, you have, like, the limitations itself helps with the creativity, because if you have just a paralysis of choice, you can kind of go everywhere and left and right, and you can get so off track and you won't be very focused, and the stuff that you do make won't be as great. So leave it up to your players. Leave it up to them and their backstories. Let them kind of do whatever it is that they want, and kind of just encourage them. If they build something that is not suited to your world, you can change it later. You can kind of change some things and say that, okay, well, this aspect doesn't really fit in my world. Can we change that? And just have your players, figure out a change that they want. You can help guide them that way, but put most of the onus on them. Put 90% of the work on them. And I know, at least personally, I would love to do this for my DM, and I have no issues with that. So don't be afraid to actually ask this of your players. Going back to the other tips, I'm going to re-emphasize some of the other things in the other tips into tip 4. Contain your players to one continent. I recommend this a lot just simply because your players can end up going in any direction. They can go in crazy ways. They can go into a place where you thought was going to be, far to the end game, and they're just like, oh, I want to check that out. And they can just go if you don't have a plan for that. You can kind of contain your players in several different ways. The easiest just being, hey guys, I don't have enough time to make out the entire world. We're going to stick to this one continent. We're not going to do planescape. We're not going to do planes travel or travel the world and go on these crazy things. We're going to have fun and have some good adventures. However, we need to stay here. Simply telling your players that, you can definitely help them understand why that you're doing it, and not just making up oh, there's a kraken in the water, you can't go out there. Well, I want to go anyway. That is an inevitable response you're going to get from the players. I don't care about the kraken, I just want to go. I want to explore the waters if my character goes down in a hail of glory. So just tell your players, we're just going to stick here. I'm very busy, job's kind of getting hectic right now. I'm going to do what I can to make sessions fun and kind of flesh them out for you and kind of get some good stories going, but I really want to stay in this one continent. Just doing that will have your players understand that, oh, you are just human. You are not just a fun machine that, these corporations that, churn out video games and churn out D&D books and churn out modules and all this stuff. You are a single person, you have a life, you have a family, possibly have kids or whatever. You are doing what you can, but we need to stay. Remember, keep it small, build in a small area, keep them in a single region. Tip number 5 is simply going to be, don't rush anything. You have all the time in the world, you're going to build while you play, and these things that you could possibly have in the future, leave them for later. Have some good ideas, write your good ideas down and kind of put them in a notebook and put them aside and kind of put them to an area where you'll remember, okay, I have this good idea, but I don't know how I'm going to integrate that into my world. Just write it down, put it over somewhere, put it out of sight. Doing this will kind of keep you focused, but you'll still have these good ideas. You won't have to, remember them and then kind of come up with them on the fly. If you can kind of put them to the side and, your characters hit a milestone, maybe they hit level 5 and you're like, okay, they're going to go into this next area or this next part of the continent or the next part of this region. Let me pull up my idea book and read through my ideas. Oh, that one will actually fit here. Boom, put it in. But really what you want to do is, if you have a good idea, don't flesh it out right this second. What you should do is put it aside, make a note of it, continue thinking about it in your head, but make sure you don't rush it. Keep with the campaign that you're doing now. You're building while you're going, and we're doing all the stuff in the other tips, but you have these ideas for later. Think about them while you're playing, and that way you don't rush things. You don't have this great idea and it comes there and you rush it in and it just falls flat on its face. It's this huge climax, and actually it's Don't rush things. Keep them in your head. Write out and reiterate and reiterate and reiterate things. But remember, just keep the game moving. Drop little hints. And then when your players pick up these little hints, then they can go on this adventure. However, don't rush it. Let the players do their thing. Let you do your thing. And just relax and don't rush. Number 6 is when you actually do build out these towns and you're not giving them to your players, or even when they give them to you, give each of the towns and cities and regions and places a type of personality. Like if you're going to build a wilderness, is this going to be a serene forest? Or is this going to be a vicious forest? Is this going to be something that's chaotic or calm or neutral or good? Or is it going to be those sorts of things? If it's going to be a town, it's going to be a lawful town, chaotic town, neutral town, evil town. We can go all sorts of these sort of areas. But giving them a personality will also frame how you think of the town. Like if this is a law and order town, like this is like a lawful, good town, how does the town manifest itself? Is it very strong guard, very loyal citizens? Is there no thieves guild? You can kind of think of it that way, and you're less likely to deviate, but also the deviations stand out as more pronounced. Like if you have a very lawful good town and everyone's very law and order, and then, oh, your characters meet a thieves guild. So think of it that way. Give them a personality, so that way the things that don't fit the personality, that just stick out, they notice them more. This will kind of help with their world building, like, oh, this is a very law and order town. Why haven't they dealt with the thieves guild? Maybe the law and order is just a facade, and the nobles are using the thieves guild for crooked things, or the business people, or the merchants, or the whoever. And you can build your story and build off of that world that way. But giving them a personality, again, reframes it, kind of keeps you in this frame of mind of, it is 90% this personality, because obviously even if you have a personality yourself, you don't fit so evenly within like the textbook, psychological personality traits. Everybody's a little bit different, and everybody kind of fits in like a 90%, but they have this one little thing where they're a little bit different. So giving them a personality doesn't mean make it super rigid and it's only this thing and they are only lawful good and there's no bad. These things don't actually exist and don't actually make sense. So giving them a personality gives you a frame of reference, but it's not hard and fast set in stone that this town is this thing. Tip number 7 is really using factions. Factions are great because you can simply just toss them out one day and just say, oh, this faction's here and this faction's here and they do this thing and there's these colors here. And doing this will help you kind of set up the world. You can kind of give each faction a personality, as we talked about in the last tip, but you don't really have to do anything with them. And then when your players interact with them, building the game during one of your sessions, interacting with them, you can say, okay, well, this guy has this sort of personality, and actually it seems like I'm giving all of these guards this sort of personality. So what if their history is actually this thing? You're world building right there. It's sort of keeping it with the personality as well. You're setting yourself up. Maybe this should have been a tip, but you're setting barriers for yourself, so you're thinking about these things in more or less self-contained little narrative pods. But then you can, after you create these self-contained little pods, you can build little splinters off, like they connect to this pod over here and this pod over here. And doing so that way gives a little bit more depth and makes things make a little bit more sense, because you can allude, like in a faction, like you have these two factions, their colors are red and blue, and you can say these factions hate each other. Well, why do they hate each other? Okay, well, they have some wars in their past, or they have this and that, and you can kind of build it that way that you can pit the factions against each other. And when you think of the factions themselves, this will kind of give you a good idea, like, oh yeah, this faction and this faction do this thing. Actually, they don't fit that personality. What if I made a third faction with that personality and kind of, okay, now there's this triangle of, factions trying to take over this town instead of this, neighborhood or this street or this city or this whatever, this country they can take over. Building on the factions will help world build in other areas as well. They can build into why the city's there? Why are other factions there? Why are these religions here? Why are these certain gods here? And setting your focus on the factions themselves can splinter off into other areas of world building. And one final thing, if you guys are here till the end of the video, don't forget to like the video if you have been getting some good information so far, because I do have a bonus tip for you here. And the one thing, if you take in any creative writing class, they always tell you to keep the end in mind when you're writing. But I'm going to go one step further, and my bonus tip is to literally keep the end in mind, as in write the ending first. That's kind of what I do in some of my campaigns. When I wrote my first module that it's kind of like being worked on now and a little bit still in process, I started with the end. I started, okay, my players are going to be, they're going to be fighting Lycans, and okay, they're going to be doing this. And what do I want the end to be? What boss do I want them to fight? How do I want the ending to look? And then you can start from there and think, okay, now I have my ending. Where am I starting? So if you keep the end in mind, you can really kind of just reverse engineer yourself back into where you want the players to start. And you can say, okay, well, I want them to go fight these Lycans that are taking over this castle over here, but I want them to start over here in investigating in a murder. So how do I connect the two? And then while you're doing that, you can think of the little events in the middle. And again, keeping yourself small, it keeps you self-contained in this little area that you're thinking about building your world in, and you don't have, the opportunity to go left and right and this and that, because all the clues that they're going to have at the beginning are going to lead you up into this ending. And if they do change it, well, you have events in place that can kind of push the story further, even if they zig or zag. And that's the end of the video, guys. So thanks for watching. If you did enjoy this, please give me a thumbs up and share this video with your friends. Until next time, have a great day.